Aloha, and welcome to the monthly Caregiver Support Group brought to you by the Caregiver Foundation in Aiea, Hawaii. We welcome all of our participants. Today's guest speaker is our very own Gary Powell, the Executive Director of the Caregiver Foundation. And Gary, I'd like to welcome you, and if you could offer anything that you'd like to share about your background in caregiving, and then take it away to today's topic.
Well, thank you very much, Leanne. And always it's a delight and a pleasure and honor to be able to share some of the things that I have in my failing brain. I call it that these days. I began caregiving a long time ago when I didn't realize I was a caregiver. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation today. But all of us are caregivers in one way or another. Many of us don't identify properly. But this program today that I'm sharing with you, I shared initially with US Bank on the continental United States for their employees. They have several hundred employees across their branches and international branches. And an amazing number of them are caregivers for their parents or their loved ones. And they face the same type of strains and stresses that we all do as caregivers. So they asked me to talk to them about caregiver emotions and how it is that we recover wellness when we're faced with emotions that perhaps cause us harm. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that works. And then we'll go through this together, and I look forward to questions. I'll go through the presentation, and then we can spend some time with questions, and then stop recording and share some situations that you might like, some suggestions from either from me or from anyone else that's on the call today. So caregiver emotions. Well, caregiving is something that we all think about a lot, and when we're in the midst of it, we think that we can do more than we really can. So right off the bat, let's make one thing clear. Caregivers don't have any superpowers. Even if you wear a cape while you're caregiving, you still don't have superpowers. We do leap tall buildings, but they're called expectations. We carry crushing loads. Those are called responsibilities. And we know that without us, things aren't going to work well in the world. Our communities, our families, actually the whole world would probably collapse without caregivers. But who are caregivers? Well, caregivers are people who provide some service to someone who cannot manage that service for themselves. Sometimes it's a brother, a father, mother, sister, grandparents, grandchild. My caregiving started when I was about 13, and I started taking my grandfather down to the beach to walk in the sand and get his legs strong after his strokes. I had no idea I was a caregiver, but that was caregiving. So even if all you do is help someone go to the market, help them with their shopping, take them to a doctor's appointment every so often, whatever it is you do to help someone else qualifies you for the term, for the label, I guess, caregiver. So if you don't think you're a caregiver, look more closely at what it is you're doing for someone. Caregiving for an elderly loved one, or maybe an adult with disabilities, is actually different than caregiving for, say, a baby, or maybe even a young adult. With a child, we're expecting that child to grow up, lead a healthy life, become happy and productive lives, have their own families, and go on and just have a great time being alive. But when we're caregiving for an elderly person, a loved one who is aging, that caregiving is not the same, because we're not anticipating them getting better. Aging doesn't, as far as we know yet, have the ability to turn itself around, aging leads to death. So caregiving for our loved ones typically results in us having an end to that caregiving, and that end is someone's passing. Maybe you had ideas of how your loved one was going to age, and you were going to be able to spend great time with them. You were going to have wonderful meals together, and the grandkids would come over and share stories and all of this wonderful thing. But maybe it hasn't happened that way. For a lot of people, it's actually quite different. Instead of someone having a great experience, it turns out to be very painful. As you can see here, sometimes instead of kind words and warm embraces, it's a slap across the face because your loved one doesn't know who you are anymore, and what are you telling them what to do? Instead of someone enjoying time with you, you think about maybe tying them down so they can't get out of bed. All these things can be different than what we might have anticipated, but as caregivers, we end up facing some emotions that determine how we're going to go through this whole caregiving journey. Those emotions really can make the difference between a caregiving journey being a horrible trip or a journey of care and a journey of remembrance. There are three emotions that I like to focus on, and I think that they are the root of all of the other emotions that face us in our caregiving journey. There's the word resentment, anger, and guilt. Those three emotions are very hard to deal with, but they will help us understand our reaction to caregiving and how we can maintain and recover wellness in our own lives. Our feelings can become less painful and less exhausting when we accurately identify what the emotions are that's driving the rest of our existence, I guess you would say. Anxiety, guilt, resentment. I think resentment is probably the first emotion that we face as caregivers when we realize that our life is no longer ours. Someone else is depending on it. We don't get to live the way we wanted to live. We don't get to retire the way we wanted to retire. Our assets are impacted by needing to help someone else. Our time is spent worrying about someone else. We resent the fact that no one in our family is helping. We look at brother who's going on a trip and you don't get to go anywhere. Or sister who's out with her friends every so often and your friends have vanished because you don't have time for them anymore. I hear this from caregivers all the time, that my life has been put on hold. We have to be really, really, really careful about resentment in caregiving, because resentment can drive us to do things that we don't want to do. And it can drive us to points in relationships that sometimes cannot be repaired. So we have to be very honest about that and look for ways to manage that resentment. We'll talk more about that. But resentment can also lead into anger. Have you ever reached a point in your caregiving where you've just thrown up your hands and said, I'm done, I can't take it anymore, I'm out of here? Right? I get this a lot. I have phone calls that come in. People said, I'm too angry, I cannot manage this anymore, I have to leave. I got a phone call once, a couple of years ago, several years ago now. Didn't know the person on the phone, but she said, I'm leaving. And I said, okay. She says, no, really, I'm leaving. I came back to take care of this jerk that I divorced 30 years ago. I've been here 4 years. He hasn't changed at all. In fact, he's worse. I'm done. The taxi's coming. I'm going to the airport and I'm done. So you guys better do something. I said, well, who are you? She told me her name. I still didn't know who she was. And I said, well, is there anyone there to help? And she said, no, that's why I'm calling you. I said, well, who are we to you? She says, I don't know. I looked you up on the internet and said you're a caregiving foundation. So I figured, well, you can take care of you. I said, okay, let's back up just a little bit. She says, no, I'm not backing up at all. I'm leaving. The taxi's on its way. You better figure out what to do because he can't take care of himself. He's in bed and he can't manage anything. So we had a staff member got on the other phone. We lined up the police and the fire department and managed to find a care agency that would respond quickly. And we got help over there, and she had already left. She had reached a point where it was more than she could handle. She was angry, and she did the only thing that she thought she could do was to leave, walk out. It's amazing to me how many people, especially wives, in a relationship that has ended in divorce, end up coming back and taking care of the person that they divorced. It's kind of amazing to me. I'm not sure I would want to do that. I admire it, but also am astounded by it. The other thing that we get angry about is losing our own life. We're not able to go on with our life. Our life gets suspended, and we can get angry about it. And then we end up angry at the person we're caring for having caused the situation. And then it reaches a great anger. Sometimes we get so angry at the person that we love. I've heard people say, I wish they would just go ahead and get busy and die. Just get it over with. And that leads us to feeling that we're terrible. We end up with feelings of guilt that are sometimes justified, but usually not. We face, why didn't I do this? Or, why did I do that? It's not their fault. They couldn't help it, but I got mad anyway. Why did I say that? Why did I yell? Guilt is something that's supposed to make us not repeat an action. So we steal something, we feel guilty about it. We're not supposed to go back and steal anything else. That's the whole purpose of guilt, is to change our actions. But when we're guilty about someone we're caring for, we're almost always feeling the wrong or identifying the wrong emotion, and guilt isn't appropriate. When we're able to really identify what's really going on, we can set that guilt word aside unless we've really done something deliberate and look at what is really bothering us. What is beneath the feelings? Is it sadness? Is it sorrow, regret? Or is it fear? Those areas, when we're able to identify that, yes, I'm really feeling sad because I know mom can't change this and I want my old mom back. I don't want this mom. She can't do things. That makes me sad and I'm grieving. I often recommend to caregivers that they sign up for a caregiver, not for a caregiver, but a grief support group in addition to a caregiver support group. When you're caring for someone who is aging, at some point you are going to be faced with having lost that person in your life. And that brings grief. But as a caregiver, realizing that that is the process you're going through of losing someone means your grief starts way earlier than someone who just gets a phone call and says, Mom died last night, and your grief begins immediately. Your grief as a caregiver may take years to resolve because your loved one stays around for years, especially when it's dementia. The person that you love and care for may not be the person that you're actually taking care of. That person may have left, and all you have left behind is a stranger's body because they don't know you anymore. And it's hard for you to look at that face that you recognize and realize they don't know me, but you still know them. And that's the difference between a caregiver and someone who's just there. A caregiver who loves the person they're providing care for sees that person no matter what. That doesn't mean that you don't grieve and that you don't feel sorrow. Guilt, not appropriate. Regret, if you've done something that you wish you hadn't said, you said something that was kind of mean, or you made a comment and now you're looking back and saying, oh, I wish I didn't say that. That's regret. That doesn't need to be guilt. Underlying almost everything else, though, is fear. I'm working on a book right now called We'll All Be Orphans One Day. At some point, most of us are going to lose our parents. Technically, that makes us orphans. But we don't really think about that. We can end up with a kind of fear that we push off, we push off, we push off. We don't want to admit that there's a fear there. We're grown people. We're not young kids anymore. Why are we afraid? But when it comes to your family, your parents, your loved ones, fear of losing them is a reality that you live with as you take care of them. So understanding that these emotions drive everything else in our reactions as caregivers. Understanding that helps us to look at how it is we can actually balance things in our lives and have a better outlook as a caregiver and take better care of ourselves in the caregiving journey. We have the power to control how we respond to our caregiving duties. There are 3 basic areas that we have to pay attention to as caregivers. Without them, we will not be healthy. We won't have taken care of ourselves, and as a result, we will not be effective and compassionate caregivers. We need to take care of our minds, like gray stuff up there, our bodies, and what I call our spirits. Those are the 3 areas that I think give us tremendous power in caregiving if we will really look at them carefully and find out what it is we can do to control things in our own lives. Let's start with the mind. This brain is an amazing thing. But did you know that the brain itself has no idea what is real and what is imagined? It's true. You ever heard those coaches tell people, imagine making that basketball go right in the hoop. Imagine yourself on the golf course making that hole-in-one. Imagine yourself in that race going through the ribbon. Imagine, see yourself doing it. The body responds to that convincing argument in a way that helps to achieve that goal. Because the brain responds to what it believes is correct. What we perceive becomes a reality. Now, if you don't believe me, let's do a little exercise. I've done this before, but I want you to close your eyes. I can see you. Close your eyes. Imagine that you're on the top of a beautiful hill, and below you is a grove of citrus trees, lemon trees, and they're in full bloom and full of fruit. And it's just wonderful, and the fragrance is coming up to you. The weather is warm, and you begin walking down this hill into that grove of lemon trees, enjoying the smell. You get closer and closer, and you see the bright yellow, shiny fruit. As you get close to one tree, you reach up and you pluck one of the lemons out and you sniff it. Oh, it smells so good. Being a good Boy Scout, you pull out your knife and you cut a slice into that lemon, and this pearly drop of lemon juice oozes up, and you put it up to your tongue and take a taste. You can open your eyes now. You have a little more saliva than you did before I started that story. It was a story, but your brain reacted to that story as though it were real. That shows you how much power we have with our brain. If we tell ourselves, this is going to be a good day, it's going to be a great day, I'm going to have a wonderful day of caregiving, chances are that day is going to be much, much better for you. Conversely, you can say, oh, I'm overwhelmed. This is just too much work. I'm so hard. Oh, this is just awful. The stress is going to kill me. Chances are it will. What we focus on is what we are going to experience more of. So if we focus and tell ourselves that things are going better, things will go better. If we tell ourselves they are going terribly, things are going to be awful, more often than not. We have that control. Seems silly, but if we will really pay attention to it, it will work for us. So there's a couple of physiological things that we can control with our brain too, if we work at it. If we calm ourselves down and we tell ourselves that things are not going badly, that they're actually doing pretty well, our blood pressure can go down, our cholesterol levels can go down, our stress can go down. All of these things will help us take better control of our bodies. Without a healthy body, we're not going to be an effective caregiver. Now we know there's certain things we need to do. Eat healthy foods, right? We know that. Well, it's not always so easy to have healthy foods just pop off the shelf and onto your dinner table. You're busy caregiving. So here's an idea. When that very well-meaning person comes up to you and says, what can I do to help you? Instead of saying, oh no, everything's fine, we're taking care of it, don't worry about it. You say, you know what? I'm not eating that healthy right now because I don't have time to fix it. Do you think you could fix me a couple of meals a week that are healthy, that I could pop in the freezer and have there so I could pull them out and just take better care of my food, my health? You'd be amazed how many people that says, yeah, I can do that. Sure. I'd be glad to help. There are so many people who will help if you give them a specific task and let them be a part of your caregiving experience. The other thing you can do is go to your cupboard, open it up, get out all the Twinkies, all the Pop-Tarts, all of those things and throw them in the rubbish. That'll be a really good step forward in eating better. Okay? Even fruit juices and those wonderful nutrition bars. Check out those things very carefully. Fruit juices are concentrated sugars. They may be 100% fruit, but that doesn't mean they're good for you. It's much better to eat the fruit instead of drink the juice. And those, what do you call them? Not energy bars, but those health bars, look at them real carefully. Are they really a good meal replacement? Probably not. So be very careful about that. The second thing is we need to get enough fluid in our bodies. Without enough fluid, nothing works. Blood doesn't go to our brain doesn't work well, everything else stops working. We have to have good hydration, and that should be in the form of water or something as close to water as we can. Other things are okay, but lay off not too much alcohol, not too much coffee, preferably not sodas, preferably not overly sugared drinks, but keep the hydration up. You don't have to have 8 glasses a day, regardless of what you've read. You need to have enough water where you feel you're fine, that your thirst is not present. That will tell you your hydration's pretty good. You can do the wonderful things, pull your skin up and see if it stays up. If it stays up, you don't have enough fluids in you. Your skin needs to be more elastic than that and pop back down. But just keep yourself a bottle of water handy, just like the bottle of water you're giving mom and reminding her to keep drinking. Every time you tell her to drink, you take a drink too. Exercise is the third area in taking good care of our bodies. I have so many caregivers tell me, I have no time to exercise. Don't even ask. Well, let me challenge you. There are a few things you can do while you're caregiving that actually end up being exercise. If you're standing at the sink and you need to do a sink full of dishes, go ahead, wash the dishes. But as you do that, raise up on your tiptoes as high as you can, count to 3. If you don't think that's exercise, feel what it does to your calves, your thighs, your butt. All of those muscles will be exercised with that simple up and downing onto your toes. Another great way of exercising is remembering what it is you left in another room, right? How many times do you go back and forth wondering, what was it I came in here for? Well, even when you remember what you came in there for, go back and forth 4 times before you pick it up. Those steps will add into your 10,000 steps a day, and it becomes an exercise routine. All of these things, you can figure it out yourself. All the things that you do, you can make intentional movements out of and let them become an exercise routine for you. There's great things you can do, even watching TV. Get one of those stretchy bands. Sit there and stretch back and forth. If you don't have a stretchy band, take a small towel and just use that. That'll exercise your chest muscles as well as your arms. So just think, what is it I'm doing? Can I make this an intentional movement? Because exercise is just intentional movement. Okay, so I'll get off my exercise bandwagon. So there are things that we can do as caregivers that will improve our minds, improve our bodies, and make us be more effective caregivers. When you're looking at sleep, it's the 4th area that I like to focus on. And I'll jump back onto medical attention, but I have some other words to say on that. But sleep is something that caregivers have a big problem with. When can we go to sleep? Mom wakes up every 5 minutes and needs to go to the bathroom. Dad doesn't want to sleep. I have to stay awake. He might wander. That's not going to work. You'll reach a point if you don't figure out how to get sleep, when you do sleep, no matter what, because your body will take over. So sleeping becomes an exercise that we have to develop and we have to create time for. That doesn't mean 8 hours straight through. That might not be possible for you, but it might be 3 sets of 2 hours, 3 sets of 3 hours. But the idea is to get into the sleep, the deep sleep, as quickly as possible so that you can really benefit from it. If you have trouble falling asleep, when you close your eyes, instead of thinking about everything that's been going on, focus on a round or a square black circle or black dot, something black, and let that item become bigger and bigger and bigger, blocking out everything else so that your eyes are focused only on this blackness. Once you learn how to do it, you will go to sleep very quickly and very deeply, because you will have been able to close off your mind to everything else. Have you ever seen a Marine in an airport sit down and go to sleep? Just while they're waiting for the plane, they just sit down in a chair, and the next thing you know, they're sound asleep. My son-in-law is a Marine, and I asked him about this once, and he said, "Oh, we're taught how to do that." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, it's a whole program that they put us through so that we can go to sleep anywhere, anytime, and wake up refreshed, ready to go to work." He said, "You can find it on YouTube and learn how to go to sleep." So maybe you want to look at YouTube and find out what that technique is. But whatever it is, find a way to make it work for yourself. Medical attention is essential. Caregivers die at a frighteningly high rate before the person they're caring for passes away. And the reason they die is primarily because they neglect their own medical health. They're not going to the doctors on time. They're not paying attention to their cholesterol. They're not paying attention to their high blood pressure. All of these areas that require medical attention, they're just putting it on the side and concentrating on trying to keep mom and dad alive by taking them to the doctors. You need to go to the doctor. If you have to pay somebody to come in and watch mom while you go to your doctor's appointment, it's worth the $50, $60, $70 an hour that you may have to pay for that. How much is your health actually worth to you? You've got to make that a priority. If you can, get one of those well-meaning people to come in and watch mom while you go to the doctor. But keep track of your own appointments. If you're taking medication, And one day comes and you goes, did I take it? Did I not take it? Get yourself a pill box. Mom may not be the only person that needs to have a pill reminder box so you can track what you've taken yourself. But pay attention to it. It's really, really important. The third thing that I like to look at is, where are our spirits as caregivers? What is it inside of you, whether it's a religious feeling of spirits or some other form, whether it's just that feeling of peace that you can have in your heart and in your life, whatever you define spirit, how is it that you can make that part of your caregiving experience? Spirit is not tangible. I guess it's the whole point of it. Many cultures teach methods of meditating. Some cultures have very proscribed ways of doing it. Others have just activities that you go into, but your spirit is something that allows you to find peace and calmness in your life. And having that as a caregiver is so essential. You may find it in music. You may find it in swimming. You might find it into the forest, doing the forest bathing bit that people are talking about these days. Find a way that you can allow yourself to completely relax and feel good about yourself. I like to do an exercise, and you're welcome to do this with me. Put your hand right above your head and imagine a raw egg is on your head. Smash it. Now feel it ooze down your head. Gross, right? Let it ooze down past your ears, down past your jaw, onto your shoulders, down your back. You know what happens as a result of you doing that? Your ears will relax, your neck will relax, your muscles will relax because you're visualizing something like an egg dripping down. You can do water, but it moves too quickly. Eggs work better. Find ways for yourself to allow your body to decompress, to relax. One of the ways I do is I like to try and do wood turning. My dad's been teaching me. He can't see well enough to do it anymore, so he puts logs on there and I get to try. If you don't focus on what you're doing when you're turning wood, you will lose a finger or two or more. So I have to concentrate. You don't think that that fits in with feeling calm and peaceful, but because I block out everything else and focus on that one task, when I'm finished with a couple of hours of wood turning, I feel so relaxed and so refreshed. It's very good for me. Other people find this with gardening. Other people find it in all kinds of things, sitting and looking at the ocean or a lake, lying back on the grass, looking up at the clouds, concentrating on them. The whole idea is to concentrate on something outside of yourself. Quiet the noises that are going on in your head. Doesn't have to be for an hour. Doesn't have to be even for 30 minutes. It can be 5 minutes. But it has to be intentional. You have to focus yourself on letting go of yourself in order to relax. So we've talked about a whole bunch of things. We've talked about identifying as a caregiver, what the position of caregiver does in our lives. How does it affect our work, our career, our family? Did you know caregivers have probably the highest incidence of families that break apart? The divorce rate among caregivers is extraordinarily high, and it's very sad. Right when people need to be the closest, it ends up breaking families apart. And you can see why. Your spouse says, I never see you anymore. Why are we even together? You're always over at mom's. The kids, maybe they're getting in trouble. Their answer to you is, what do you care? You're not around. All these things we have to be conscious of and find ways to work on those. They're very critical. And we've reached points where it's just too much. If you ever reach a point where it is too much for you, walk out the door If you have to call 911 and say, I can't be there right now, go ahead and do it. Somebody will be able to find a way to help you. Don't stay if you think you're going to lose control and potentially hurt yourself or hurt someone else. You don't need to feel guilty if you haven't done something to hurt someone. If you have, feel guilty. Don't do that again. We talked about using our minds, using our bodies, taking care of those aspects of our life that make us healthier, help us regain the wellness that we want to have in our lives. With that wellness, we find that we're better caregivers. So much of what we do in caregiving depends on us. We can choose to take a journey that's full of potholes and stomach churning twists and turns and just have a horrible trip. Or we can have one that may have bumps. It may have corners that we go around and things that pop into the road unexpectedly, but it doesn't have to be the most devastating journey. It can be a better journey. It depends on how we're driving. How we're driving this vehicle that is us. So caregiving, our emotions, our life as a caregiver, things to focus on with yourself and with those that you love. Of course, we're always available anytime anybody wants to get a hold of us and ask a question or complain about something. We're really good at listening to those. And you might have some questions today or some comments that you'd like to share. And I'd be happy to give you what I think, and others will be able to share what they think too. So why don't we stop the recording now and spend some time together just talking about caregiving